Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. Today is Friday, May the 2nd, and we're honored and delighted that you're here to be part of this conversation. And we're going to jump into the level of how the mind generates the realities that we think are outside of us. And we don't realize that if we're in pain, the reason we're in pain is because the reality that's moving in us is the cause of the pain. We make pictures out of what's moving in us, and we think the pictures are something outside of us. And so, the basic question, why is this happening to me again, ends up being, gee, I'm seeing all these other people, and look at my pain is the same every time. Why do they do that to me? How do they know how to do that to me? And when is it ever going to stop? Well, it's going to stop when you stop doing that to yourself. Well, but Michael, I'm not doing it to myself. It's everybody else. Yes, but I'll just ask you a quick question. You'll notice if you've been through a particular painful reality 87 different times with 42 different people, you're the only one that was there every time. And you notice the nature of the pain is the same over and over and over again. There's a reason for that. It's inside of you. If you went back 2,000 years ago and you asked this man, Yeshua, well, what's the deal? What do we need to do? Here's what he'd say. Take care the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. Now, that word heart in our modern updated language would be the unconscious. We don't know we're doing it to ourselves because we have relegated the dynamics of our pain, hidden it away in the unconscious, and then we hide it on still another level by literally making pictures of other people or what we think are other people out of that pained content so that they show up in our mind. And we've got evidence that it's all their fault because, look, they're the one that's doing it to me. I can see them doing it to me. Well, our objective here is to change that game, is to offer the tools for accessing literally, and this is like the most important piece of information I would offer. Well, let's say one of the top 10 pieces of information you could ever have. There is a way to access your own heart, your own unconscious, so that you can take care of it. And it's called forgiveness. And that's nothing to do with the Greeks telling you to let somebody else off the hook. That has absolutely nothing to do with forgiveness. Forgiveness literally is a technology with which you collapse the false pictures in your mind. And when those false pictures collapse, that collapse gives you access to your own unconscious dynamics. Now, that's not a Dr. Feel-Good process. That's not a process that most people enjoy at the beginning. Because instead of being able to project those pictures, instead of taking that unconscious content, making pictures of other people about it, painting those pictures on the inside of our eyeballs, and believing we're looking out there, leaves us in this never, never land. But when you learn to collapse the pictures your mind is generating and recognize that your mind has this absolutely awesome ability, it's the ability to turn thoughts into pictures. Much like your TV set. If you look in the wires in which the signal is coming through your TV, you can chop those signals up, you can stretch them, you can tear them, you can do whatever you can do with them. You're never going to find a picture. Well, how does the TV get a picture? There's a converter. There's information in the signal. There's information coming through the wires. And there's a converter that converts that information into pictures. That's exactly what our minds do. And as long as I'm living in a world of denial, and that's the basic bottom line of all codependence, as long as I'm living in denial, and what is denial? It's not the psychological denial that most people talk about of, well, I pretended that terrible thing never happened. That's not what we're referring to as denial. We have a very specific definition. And the definition is when I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me, I'm in denial. Now, of course, I'm speaking my thoughts. So when I say, you made me mad, my thought is converted into a picture, and I see a totally fake false picture of you making me mad. You got to collapse those pictures. And that's the technology of forgiveness. And because most of us were literally seated at the earliest levels of our lives in the one world universal religion of blame, fault, and victimhood, we believe the pictures. Collapsing the pictures and coming into direct contact with the information rather than projecting the information into our brain's image of others is a challenging thing to do. It is a practice. It is a practice that probably has not been seen in your family system or mine in at least, who knows, thousands of years. Thousands of years. Go back and look at the history and look at the blame game. Look at the wars. Look at the battles. Look at the fights. It's always somebody else's fault. When we live in the premise that it's somebody else's fault, our mind, being an evidential device, says, okay, I'll give you evidence that it's somebody else's fault. The only thing your mind can never give you is evidence of your own BS. That's belief system, of course. Maybe you've got a different reality for those initials, but BS is belief system. And when we have been given thoughts about ourselves, and these thoughts come very early, they usually come from a power person, and they're thoughts about how you're not good enough, you're broken, there's something wrong with you, you'll never be good enough, you'll never make it. When one makes a picture of themselves, a body out of those thoughts, then the self that they think they are is made up of that pain and trauma. And that pain and trauma becomes an addiction. We're here to support the breaking of that addiction. So we are we're beat into submission and intimidated into creating this false self. The power person has more power over us than we had any given moment. And when we perceive the situation as one of survival, which, gee, if my power person doesn't take care of me at 2, I'm dead. So we create this false self. You'll remember if you go back and listen to Yeshua, this is what he was addressing when he said, in order for you to live, you've got to die. The false self has to be dismantled, has to be removed. And into this false self is integrated the original trauma of being used by our power person as a screen upon which they placed their blame. When we make the decision, and it's a genetic decision, it's one that comes automatically, that we must fulfill what we perceive to be our power person's needs, even though their needs are unfulfillable. The power person says, oh, I don't feel loved. And so what does the codependent say? Well, I'll help to make you feel loved, and they'll do everything possible. But guess what? That power person can only experience what we would call the feeling of love when they experience the truth of who they are. You can't fulfill that need for them. And when you try and play into the game to fulfill an unfulfillable need, now life becomes difficult, impossible. In fact, it can't be done. So when we were used by the power person by becoming the screen upon which they projected their pain, so they didn't have to face their pain directly, this meant that they were always feeling and functioning out of their pain, but didn't know it was theirs. And as a result, could not resolve it. That's a genetically inherited trait. If your power person always had someone to blame, they were feeling pain, functioning out of it, but thought it was caused by someone else, notice you do the same. How many spend their whole lives in that pattern? Always feeling pain, but never directly, never knowing that it was their own, because they copy the power person pattern of never being responsible and always blaming somebody else. And the energy that gets churned up in doing that is monumental. It's actually a little poem that's dedicated to the trauma rage body. My candle burns at both ends. It cannot last the night. But oh, my friends, oh, my foes, it sheds a lovely light. If we follow the modeled, and it's hard, I would say nigh unto impossible, not to follow the modeling, pardon me, that our power persons gave us. And then changing it is, it's monumental if you're the early adopter, if you're the first one. So this is a dynamic that gets integrated into our false self. This image in our mind, made out, it's a picture, but remember, the mind converts thoughts to pictures. So if the false self, we accept the power person, you're to blame, it's your fault, you're broken, there's something wrong with you. If that's the foundation of our quote unquote thinking about ourselves, that's the foundation of the picture in our minds of ourselves. And so that original trauma is rooted right in that false self. Again, that's the self that Yeshua said, in order to live, you've got to die. And you can't clean that up if you're still playing out the power person pattern of never being responsible and always blaming others. You can't clean it up. The other thing that's integrated into this false self is the original rage and resentment at being deprived, literally, of having been forced to give up our birthright, our true self, love, in order to do what we thought we had to do, and that was try to fulfill our power person's unfulfillable needs. So this original rage and resentment is right in there, right in the structure, along with the original trauma. Literally all of these energetic patterns. So the original resentment, a series of false trauma-based ideas that we became identified with, and we call this ego, E-G-O. If in fact you are truly made of love, and the equivalent word of love is God, E-G-O, edging God out, edging love out of experience. We formulate this non-being mind, literally a picture, generated by the mind out of false thoughts about ourselves and out of false experiences and out of energetic patterns that never belonged in the human structure. And they've been going on for thousands of years on the planet. And out of this comes the mental, the physical, the psychological profile of the self we think we need to do in order to survive. And you can never do your way out of that. And that self is based in the trauma experience of danger. And in order for it, once we become identified with it, in order for it to survive, it must be protected from the truth. If the truth enters in, every false idea starts to surface and the stress goes up. You watch a person who lives in blockage of truth, someone who's clearly not in touch with what is happening in the actuality, and you bring information about the truth forward to them and watch their stress go through the roof. There's an ancient story about that in the scriptures. Remember this guy, John the Baptist? Remember they called him the raving maniac in the desert? Why did they call him the raving maniac in the desert? If you're ever going to move out of the false self, if you're ever going to move out of the self that is a product of thoughts in carbon-based memory, thoughts based in genetics and a history of hostility, fear, and pain and trauma, if you're ever going to free yourself from that, then you're going to have to meet somebody who's going to be able to resonate or show that to you. That was John the Baptist. Now, you'll remember John the Baptist had his head removed. You ever have somebody come to you and say, look, here's the truth, and off with your head is their response? Why? Because when one is in blockage of truth and truth shows up, stress goes through the roof. When stress goes through the roof, people do whatever their power person did to them that they hated the most. So John the Baptist lost his head. Why? Two things. Two skills John the Baptist had not developed. He did not know when to duck or when to hold the mirror up. He delivered truth to the king and the queen, and they didn't want to hear it, and they literally took off his head. And of course, if you've ever delivered truth to someone who's in block of truth, you know exactly how that works. Off with your head. So this, in order to stay integrated within carbon-based memory, within the mind, this false self cannot face, cannot look at the truth. Because the instant it looks at the truth, it dissolves. So let's recognize that the root of every relationship formed out of this false self is resentment, it's trauma, it's fear, and it's rage. The root of the false self is resentment, trauma, fear, and rage. Thoughts, mind energy, based in error. Received from authorities, power persons in particular, in a mind that turn into pictures. And we call the world calls those relationships love relationships. I'd offer that they're relationships based in matching bags of garbage. And it's beautiful. It's perfect. Because unless you've got somebody who's got the matching bag of garbage to yours, you're never going to have anyone who will show you what you need to deal with. So those relationships are perfect. The problem is the world calls them love relationships rather than relationships in which each person, if they're willing to stop playing the child game of blame and actually grow into adulthood and responsibility, all of a sudden the relationship that yesterday would send you and hold you in hell for eternity becomes the escape and the pathway, the gateway to heaven, to living as a human being. John the Baptist delivered information, the queen's stress went up, and she got rid of him. You ever try to get rid of somebody? One of the biggest issues on planet Earth is leaving. I have to get rid of you so that I don't have to feel what's going on inside of me. If you didn't have something going on inside of you to be resolved, and somebody does crazy stuff, you know what you'll do? You'll look at them and go, that's crazy stuff. And you'll be at peace. You'll stay connected to the truth of who you are as love. This original resentment, this original rage is the cause of at least 110% of all physical, mental, and emotional pain. It is an energy that resides in tissue that formulates pictures in the mind, but creates dis-eases in the structure, in the carbon-based memory where it's stored. You know, let's imagine that your computer, let's say you have a newspaper, and the quality of stories that you put into your computers to publish your newspaper impact the quality of the computer itself. So negative information going into the computer destroys the functioning, the structure of the computer itself. Positive information strengthens it. How long, take a look around at the newspapers in the world. How long do you suppose any computer that functions like that would last? Not very long, with all the garbage that's been put in. Well, your body mind unit is the comparable storage device for information. And the difference between the computer that sits on the desk in the newspaper office and yours is that yours is alive, and the quality of energy and information that goes into it impacts directly the quality of the function of your cellular structure. And your emotions are nothing but warning signals that tell you when you're putting something in the system that doesn't belong in the system. Now, once this false self, this fake self, is created in brain cells, there's a problem, because it will forevermore create scenarios, realities. Remember, Paul talked about we see as though through a glass darkly. It will forever create realities that justify everything it has come to believe that it needs. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy thing. That old idea that to the hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. Well, to a false self based in trauma, its power person dynamics, its ability to attack, defend, blame, it can't survive without those energies, and therefore it creates scenarios with which those energies become necessary until forgiveness comes in. So it generates realities that demand all of the, and I put this in big quotes, the skills that is created: war, intimidation, fight, anger, victimhood, hysteria, all of those things. The mind that is based in those things will call those things skills, and it will generate realities on demand that justify having and using those skills. And what people don't recognize is they get the original, everybody else gets the carbon copy. So the mind based in this type of thinking, in these kinds of generational patterns, believe that these things are necessary and useful. And the truth is, all of it exists only as a projection from brain cells. It exists nowhere else. So the mind builds scenarios around its reality, its skills, and then evidences whatever is needed to justify that. Of course, it's about somebody else. No, there are a lot of myths in the world that we need to put an end to. We've got a myth that says the good guy kills the bad guy and is the hero. So someone who got a message from their power person that they're weak and helpless and will never amount to anything, what are they going to do? Oh, I'm going to learn to kill because then I can be a good guy. So now the lie, killing people, or the verse of that, killing people, of course, we're told no, negative, never do it. But now it becomes a good thing. What was that about? Calling good evil and evil good? So it's now an heroic effort. And one becomes the good guy by killing. Excuse me, folks, that's insane. And there are many myths that we teach in the world that reinforce this insanity. And it's just an assumed part of the culture. And it's the part that each of us needs to heal. And when, Yeshua said a little leavening leavens the whole loaf, he wasn't talking about a loaf of bread. He was talking about humanity. He presented tools with which to enhance life. You remember he said, I come to bring you life more abundantly. What is life? Life is love flowing through a cell. He came for one reason, to show you how to enhance that. And everything that you do, every skill your mind has that says, oh, this is a hero skill. I need to be able to use this. Look, I can beat them down. Look how well I can rage. Well, I'll tell you what, human life, love, and rage cannot coexist in a human form. Only one gateway, only one filter can be active in the mind at a time. And, we offer kids so many fantastical ideas through films, and people say, well, they know that it's just a fantasy, that movie where they're killing and all of that, or that game where they're doing all that. They know it's just a fantasy. Well, that's true, but when you realize that words and visual links impact behavior, when a reality is spoken into a mind, that mind will forever create scenarios that will demand those skills. Real or imagined, the mind will generate it in order to make it logical to play out that reality and whatever the insanity is that it demands. Now, when we do life out of the non-being self, there are those pseudo-solutions. We try to do, we try to get, we try to have control, use, or just go unconscious in order to manage life's stresses and gain security. And there's no security in anything based in hostility or fear. All that actually happens is this behavior conforms to our false image of self, which was based in these thought disorders. I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. And then, of course, the message, because the powered person never had the tools and never figured it out, the message was passed on. Life is unresolvable. It's hopeless. There's nothing you can do. And the truth is, that's a lie. And it's time for us to give up the lie. It's time for us to recognize who we are and clean up this multi-generational database. It is a process. It is not a Dr. Feelgood process, but it can be done. And what we're here to do is to create support for working through every thought disorder based in the non-being mind, based in some form of hostility or fear. Now, just quickly, because we covered this last week, but I'm just going to quickly run through the dirty dozen, the main 15 or so pseudo solutions. If I could just fit, and I'm running this through just quickly as a reminder, the mind, the non-being mind, with all the skills it's built, will tell you, here's what we have to do. This is how it'll work. And it's all a lie. They are pseudo solutions. None of these will ever work. So, number one, if I could just figure this out, what, why, how did this happen? Then everything will be okay. And people who spent a lifetime is trying to figure it out. You can't figure it out. You can forgive it, but you can't figure it out. Next pseudo solution, to fight. Winning becomes most important. If I could just beat them. And remember, once these are established in the mind will create scenarios that demand that you play them out. I mean, have you ever had anybody do that with you? Have you ever had someone create a scenario by accusing you of something that absolutely never happened, and that scenario demanded a skill that they had, and they were able to win, fight, beat you? That's the game of the non-being mind. Third pseudo solution, if I could just forgive them, or forgive myself, or the situation. Never forgive anyone for anything. Apply forgiveness to the energetic dynamics that are held within your own structure to remove those energetic dynamics, and now you've got a repair process. You've got the tools. Next pseudo solution, if I could just fix, And that usually means if I could just control them or myself, if I or they were just good enough, could be enough, could do enough. You can't ever do enough. You can't ever be enough. You're not going to be ever good enough in the non-being mind. When you dissolve the false self and being enters, goodness enters because that's what it is. Love enters because that's what you are. You've got to make your physiology a welcoming home for the active presence of love that you are. So fixing, controlling, no, not going to happen. Being good enough, not going to happen. Next pseudo solution number 5, if I could just find somebody to love, which really means if I could find somebody to approve of me or find someone to love, someone that I could approve of. You notice, unless you're a generally miserable person, you'll notice you are never upset, except when someone violates a goal you hold for them. Now, you'll notice that people, when they say, I love you, are all hunky-dory, everything's wonderful, until you violate a goal they hold for you. And then you'll notice that in an instant, love can turn to hate. Can love turn to hate? Absolutely impossible. Cannot happen. But can approval turn to disapproval in an instant? Yes. And when approval turns to disapproval within the context of a relationship, and people say, oh, see, they don't love me anymore, what's really happening there is the honeymoon is over because it wasn't a relationship based in love in the first place. It was a relationship based in approval and disapproval. And that's perfect because that's where the healing happens. Sixth pseudo solution, if I could just control everyone and everything. Seventh is the strain and the struggle to make up for a non-being life. Got to have lots of stuff in order to be validated. Eighth pseudo solution, if I could just project my pain deeply enough into my brain's image of them. This is the blame game. If I could just convince them, and I'm so convinced that they're the cause of my pain. And you watch the kind of blasting that people do in order to convince others that they're responsible for what's going on inside of their partner. Ninth pseudo solution, take the easy way, just stay on autopilot. Do the behaviors from the past, just run the family program. 10th, be right. If I'm right, never suspect yourself. Prove that you're not responsible. That becomes another pseudo solution. Number 11 is to obfuscate. Oh, all kinds of distractions, confusion. There's an issue at hand, and the issue is ABC. But somebody raises their voice and does XYZ, something not even related, but all that noise creates a distraction. There's confusion, switched issues, and all of a sudden, one doesn't have to face what it was that was the original situation or conversation. That's never going to create healing. 12th pseudo solution, if I could just leave, if I could just get out of here. And an extension or reflection of that escaping is to pretend that, well, I'm not that way. I'm not angry. I'm not afraid. That also includes getting rid of, whoever the them is. Hostility is the next 13th pseudo solution we've identified. Or any other drug. Hostility is not an emotion, it's just a drug. If I can anesthetize myself deeply enough, what the non-being mind says, I want it to feel the stuff, the energy that I am made of. And the number one drug in the culture is busyness. Number 2 is hostility. 14th pseudo solution, give up. It's hopeless. I'm guilty. It's helpless. I might as well accept it. There's nothing I can do. That's never going to bring healing. There is always something you can do. There are always the tools with which to dissolve the energetic patterns that are causing the emotions that move in you, the pain, the trauma. And as those tools are applied, and when you recognize that what you're working through is generation upon generation upon generation of those energetic dynamics to recognize it doesn't happen overnight. And then pseudo solution number 15, and certainly not saying this is all of the pseudo solutions that there are, but these are kind of, as I like to call them, the dirty dozen. So number 15, yeah, it's a baker's dozen. I know better than they do. And this is someone who plays out of, I've got to be the smartest person in the room or I'll suffer. I'll be punished. I'll be abandoned. I'll be psychologically annihilated. So these are all pseudo solutions for trying to resolve what the mind has already informed you is unresolvable. And remember that fulfilling your power person's needs is not love. When we believe that fulfilling perceived needs is love, or them fulfilling ours, then doing is substituted for being. Dissolving the doing mind, dissolving the false definition makes a space for it creates an opening. The veil of the temple is this body mind unit. The veil opens and there is room for your human life, the actual presence of love, to come into your physiology and heal you. Otherwise, people live in the space of doing as a substitution for being. And then they wonder why everybody doesn't just think, oh, it's so great. Look what I'm doing. Well, it's really nice. But I came to be in relationship with you as a being. I'm inviting you to be instead of do. And yeah, we all need to do a certain amount, but once we turn that backward, there's a major healing process to be done. And this can also create a real challenge in relationships because if we were taught that in order to be acceptable, in order to be approved of, we had to fulfill all of our power person's needs, and that has not been resolved as a dynamic within us, then we imagine that our partners have the same needs our power person did. And then we're further enraged because they don't appreciate all the work we do to quote unquote love them. But it's not got anything to do with love. So playing out the dynamics established with the power person in a relationship means people spend a lot of time functioning as human doings and fulfilling the projection of perceived needs instead of functioning as the active presence of love. Because that fulfilling needs as a form of quote unquote love is a non being mind seeking for approval, and it's actually resentment based in hatred. Why? Because the power person, in essence, in the experience with the power person, this being called love gave up its essential nature in order to provide or to attempt to provide, fulfill the unfulfillable needs of the power person, and never got approval for it because it would never work. So fulfilling these needs comes from all of the experiences and energy absorbed from the power person when the power person themselves without a being and therefore probably inflicting trauma. And that is why in current relationships, people will oftentimes dump their whole bag of garbage on the person they say is the beloved if they're not fulfilling every goal we have for them. And the message you give in that situation is the message you hated getting from your power person. So each of these dynamics is up for being worked through, dealt with, and healed. And we are at about the 3/4 point through the hour. And so what I would like to do is head over to the phone lines and see if anybody has a thought or a question for us. If you do, what I'll ask you to do is to hit the call button. And once we get to the call line, we'll have an opportunity to say hello. So if you haven't called in the show before, there's a call button there in the app. You hit that call button, and that opens a little window, and it asks you a question, so you fill them in, a checkbox, and then there's a grayed out second call button, and that one will light up, and you can hit it, and then there'll be your hand will be up in the phone queue. So I'm going to head over there and see if anybody has a question for us. If you push that button now. Of course, if we've got no one in the queue, we'll just continue with these principles from the codependence to interdependence workshop. I hope this is serving and making sense and giving you the opportunity to connect on a deeper level. The objective of this radio show is to support each person connecting on deeper and deeper levels with these tools for literally opening the veil of the temple being the body-mind unit, the veil being the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious mind. You know, it can be a really a good thing to understand. A principle here is the difference between the subconscious and the unconscious. Many people will talk about, the mind like there are a dozen different ones. You made it up, you lost it, all kinds of things about the mind. Basically, when we're talking about what the world calls the mind, what we're talking about is a function of stored information firing off in brain cells. And every cell in the body functions as a brain cell. That's why the quality of mind energy you engage in affects the quality or the function of the cell in which it's stored. So if I say, don't think about the color of your car, you'll notice the word don't doesn't mean anything. Something in your mind starts to move about the color of your car. If your car is red or blue, you probably went into it's red or it's blue. Or, sometimes in workshops I've had people, well, I'm not thinking about it. Oh, really? What is it you're not thinking about? In order not to quote unquote think about it, you had to quote unquote think about it, right? So mind's just this resonance device. So when we're talking about the mind, we're talking about how information that is stored in brain cells fires. If I say, what's your favorite item of clothing? That information is stored in brain cells. You become aware of it. What's the front door of your house look like? You can see it. What's your favorite food? What food do you detest the most? Notice all that information is stored in your mind and is easily accessible to you because it is subconscious information. Subconscious means you can access it anytime you want. Now, you'll notice when I asked you about the food you detest or you dislike the most, you weren't thinking about the color of your car. Why? Because those brain cells weren't firing. So when you look at that list I just went through, what I did was provided a stimulation that caused brain cells to fire in you. And you can see easily that conscious and subconscious are changing places all the time. The color of your car, the item of clothing, the food you like, the food you don't like. That's all information stored in your subconscious. You allow yourself to become aware of it. And so we see when I'm thinking about the color of my car, The food isn't firing the brain cells that represent that. Now, then there's the unconscious. If I ask you, you're listening to this workshop and something has resonated for you that's a major issue in your life that you're ready to deal with, what is that major issue? What is it that you're hanging out with this work to do? And what you'll notice is most people, and in holding the breath, they shut down the veil of the temple. And when the veil of the temple is shut down, the information below that veil is not available. So now we've got unconscious. Now, my offering is that the unconscious is a totally, completely unnatural state for a human being. It does not belong in the human form. We are designed to have a conscious mind, what we're aware of at any given moment, and then this massive database with all of this subconscious information, which we can call up on demand at any point we want. When the breath is shut down, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to feel this. It locks the information in on a cellular level and locks it out of awareness. And that we would define as the unconscious. And my offering is that's a totally unnatural condition. We're not designed to have an unconscious mind in any way, shape, or form. And so recognizing how the mind operates, the objective here, again, remembering that statement in the scriptures, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. That word heart would be the equivalent of our word today of the unconscious. What it's saying is, whatever information you have stored in you that you don't want to deal with, that information, because you're shutting it down, you're putting energy into it. And when you put energy into it, you press it out into experience in the world. You remember Carl Jung so beautifully said, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In other words, whatever it is I most don't want to deal with is what I hold the highest level of energy on, and I'm continuously, literally sending out a high energy wave that will tend to draw that very experience to me. Way back, going back, geez, almost 40 years ago now, I used to keynote at a conference every year called Global Sciences. And at the Global Science Conference one year, a gentleman named Marcel Vogel came to the conference as a presenter. Marcel Vogel, if you're not familiar with the name, is a 23-year senior scientist from IBM. The kind of mind Marcel has, the kind of creativity that Marcel had, and he was just the sweetest guy, was that the reason your and my computer work today is because as an employee for IBM, Marcel invented the magnetic coating that goes on the disks in your hard drive that allows your hard drive to store information. At the age of 11, Marcel Vogel invented, and as a kid, patented chemical light. You go to a football game and you buy a light stick and you crack it, chemicals mix, and you get light from it. Marcel was 11 when he invented that. So Marcel comes to the Global Science Conference. He's one of the keynote speakers, and he brings with him a camera, and it's called a Delaware camera. It was invented by an Englishman named George Delaware. And it's a camera that's different from any camera you and I have ever seen, in that in front of the aperture on the camera, there is a tuning mechanism. And much like you would tune a radio or a TV, you switch to different stations, you could tune the device in front of the aperture so that if there was something, even if the eye couldn't see it, in front of the camera that the device was tuned to, then when you opened the aperture, that what would show up on the photographic plate would be whatever that was in front of the camera. So let's do an example. One of the pictures that he showed us is a picture taken by this camera of an acorn. And the developed picture on the photographic plate is an oak tree. And people say, well, right, wait a minute, that makes no sense. I mean, an acorn, how can you? Well, let's think about this. Remember, we've said before, you can't heal unless you know what the truth is. Unless you're functioning within truth, there is no really true healing. And the real full true healing is a full incarnation or embodiment of yourself as the presence of love, displacing every other frequency in your physiology throughout your whole genetic history. That's true healing. Now, I'm in a room, you're in a room somewhere, you're in a car, wherever it is, and you'll notice that I can't hear any voices here. So obviously, because I can't hear any voices, I come to the very, very errant conclusion that there are no voices in this room. But hey, if I turn my radio on, I can tune to 100,000 different voices. If I turn the TV on, I can tune to pictures and sounds, more voices, music, all going on in this room right now. But only if I have a tuning mechanism that can receive those frequencies. Now, you think about an acorn, and it's really very obvious that nobody has ever planted an acorn and had a Volkswagen grow out of the ground, or a cornstalk, or an apple, or a bird. Every time you plant an acorn, it grows into an oak tree. Why? Because the oak tree is already in the acorn. Obviously, much as the same frequencies that are moving around this room right now, if I turn on my radio, I'll be able to hear them because I've got a tuning mechanism for them in exactly the same way. Every energy has a frequency. And obviously, in the acorn is the instruction set as to how to grow an oak tree. You put an acorn in the ground here, and you put a pear tree, a pear seed beside it, and the acorn takes all of the air, the earth, the water, the sun, the minerals, the nutrients in the soil, and it builds according to the image that's in the oak tree, or pardon me, in the acorn. The pear tree, an inch away, takes all the same elements and turns it into pears. Why? There is a pattern there. If you can read the pattern, then obviously you can take a picture of it. And that's exactly what the Delaware camera was able to do. The upshot of that was that what Marcel brought to show us was pictures that he had taken of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. Literally, every thought you think is the movement of electrons in your structure. And that movement, every movement of energy creates an energy wave. And when you recognize that process, you recognize that you are a creator. And out of the energetic patterns that you engage, you create your life. The objective here is to recognize that if there are generational energetic patterns of hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, pain, drama, and trauma, that way you free yourself of them is not by pretending they're not there, is not by blaming somebody else for it. It's by the willingness to and having the technology and the tools to access and remove what did not belong there in the first place. That is literally to access everything based in any form of hostility or fear. And rather than projecting it into your brain's image of someone else and thinking that by controlling the world, by being good enough, by all the pseudo solutions, thinking that's going to resolve anything is just silliness. What's going to resolve everything in your life is the realization of who you are as the conscious active presence of love and the ability to displace anything less than love, to remove anything less than love, so that there is room for you to incarnate fully as conscious active present love. And that means that you have to give up codependence. You have to give up the blame The belief that somebody else is responsible for what's moving inside of you. Because as long as you are in the blame game, blame, you made me mad, says to the mind, you keep all of that information that shows me that I'm responsible for this condition called mad in my unconscious. Don't show it to me. And hallucinate for me a picture about how it's somebody else's fault. So now the very energy that's stored in my tissue structure that's creating my dis-ease or my discomfort is turned into a picture of somebody else. And now I think somebody else is the problem in my life. It's the grandest lie ever told. The truth about each of us is we're all made of the same stuff. It is life. Your life is not about you. Your life is about life. Life is about life. When you choose to serve life, rather than all the pseudo solutions and all the things you think will resolve things, then you step into the flow of life and everything changes. We're here to learn with you and to support you in living as the conscious, active presence of love. And have a blessed day. Appreciate you. Bye-bye.